Today I wanted to give you my super quick tip about description, which could theoretically be a how to stop being an underwriter conversation if the reason that you're underwriting is because you forgot to put in any description, like me. So the thing about description is that a lot of people fall on two sides of a binary about this, and as I will always put the disclaimer out there, you don't technically have to fall on either side of this binary. You don't have to sit in a camp for the rest of your life. You can love description sometimes and hate it at other times. You can want it to be used effectively, but effectively means different things to different people. And if you are like me and kind of have a tendency to skim past description in books, which is a huge part of the reason that you struggle to write description in your own books, this could be useful. And if you are not this kind of person and actually you spend pages and pages writing description and you love that, go ahead and do that. Don't even stress yourself. You will find people who want what you are like wanting to write. I had the thing the other day where I came across somebody talking about how they hate books. So I came across somebody the other day who was talking about how they hate books that start in media res, which is in the middle of the action. Like books that start with a fight scene, or books that start with an intense conversation, or books that start with some kind of dramatic purpose where you don't really get any introduction to the characters before it starts, and that being a big part of why they tended towards fan fiction rather than modern books, because so many modern books start in media res, in the middle of the action. I mean, I'm definitely a person who does this because I did it in Arlan Breaking the Curse. I do it in my pirate project that I'm writing. I've done it in pretty much everything. I like starting in the middle of the action because that's kind of how I picture the book when I'm writing it. And I have no qualms about this. This is also the kind of book that I like to read, so obviously I'm going to do that. Hello, Bela. But it doesn't change the fact that you still need to add a description. So, like I said, there will be people who fall on all kinds of camps with regard to this. There will be people who love reading description in books. There will be people who hate reading description in books. There will be people who like a little bit of description. There will be people who like it in specific settings, at specific times, and all of those kinds of things. There's just so many different people. But the thing is, yeah! Do you mind? But the thing is you can't just not have any description in your book. Like, maybe you can, do what you want, but I really don't think it's advisable. And if you're watching this video, then there's every chance that you also are looking to improve or create a greater amount of description in your novel. One final disclaimer before we get to the actual advice, and I'm so sorry it's taken me this long. My final disclaimer is I do not do this for my short stories. If you're looking to see proof of action, if you're looking, because I know some people have that, where they desperately want... Oh, he's got paper. I know some people have that, where they desperately want to have, proof that the person giving the advice is taking their own advice. Or, an admission that they're intentionally not taking their own advice. This is me telling you now, I don't do this in my short stories. If you want to see examples of my description, you can sign up to my mailing list and get the first 3 chapters of Arlan Breaking the Curse completely free. I mean, you could also buy the book, that would be great. But if you don't want to spend your money on it, you could also request it from your library, which would be a great way to support me without spending any of your own money. But basically, if you can read the first 3 chapters completely free over on my mailing list, which all the links are in the description box below, if that's something you wanted to investigate, because I do have description in the first 3 chapters of Arlan Breaking the Curse. So, what's the tip then? If you don't do it in short stories? And also, potentially, why don't I do it in my short stories? Well, it's for a couple of factors, actually. But some of the reasons I don't do it on my short stories is because this is one of the last things I do when writing a book, usually. Unless something is really clear in my mind as a visual image, I probably won't describe it. I probably won't even think that it needs a description because it just doesn't come to mind, I guess. So I go back through and I intentionally describe things as one of the last steps before I do things like well, all of the things that are to do with publishing, like editing and all that jazz, the description is one of the last things I do. And I go through and I just blast through the description all in one go. And part of that is to maintain character description and location description. So like, I know what this character looks like because I've literally just described them 5 seconds ago in an earlier section where we were first introduced to them. So what is the tip? The tip, the golden rule. 3 sentences. 3 sentences. It sounds ridiculous, but it can be that simple. I pick 3 sentences of description for every location, every character that's important, every item that's of importance to the plot. I do 3 sentences of each of those things. And I can have more, and very occasionally I can have less, especially if like we've already been introduced to what the character looks like and I'm just building upon a foundation established in a previous scene. But 3 sentences. It doesn't matter what is contained within those 3 sentences. Like when you're describing a character, people have done this where they've created like laundry lists of the kind of description you can use. Don't use a laundry list. Where they're like, describe their eye colour, describe their hair colour, describe their skin colour, describe their build. I forgot that I was on for. Describe their build, describe their fantasy race, describe their actual race. Describe whether they wear glasses, describe what their clothes look like. What kind of shirt are they wearing? You know, like, I could go through and list my own description for you like that as a laundry list. Nobody wants to read a laundry list, or very few people, because I imagine there's still a lot of them. Very few people enjoy reading the laundry list description, which is why my ruling that I have created for myself, that I am offering to you for you to take up if you so wish, is the 3 sentences thing. Sentence number 1 can be anything about the person. It can be their bearing, it can be their colour palette, it can be their face in detail, it could be a description of their hair. Sentence number 2 can be anything. It can be a description of their bearing, it can be a description of their colour palette, it can be a description of their face in detail. It doesn't matter. But those 3 sentences are usually 3 different things that kind of build upon one another. They don't all have to be smushed together, but often I do that because it's just easier. And then I move on with the scene. Because 3 sentences are not enough to interrupt a scene, especially actually if you do break them up. But 3 sentences are usually not enough to break up the scene, but they are enough to give people a brief and relatively cohesive picture of what's going on, of who these people, like what these people look like, of what this location looks like, that they're not just in a white box, they are in an actual space that exists within the universe that you have built. And the space has an appearance, as one might presume a space would. And the beauty of doing it as 3 sentences is that you can pick out 3 specific features if you so wish and describe them in relative detail, because a lot of people will be able to fill in the blanks. I know this isn't true of all people, I didn't say all people, but a lot of people will be able to fill in the blanks. Like, if you described this room in my rented house that I'm about to leave, or actually by the time this video comes out, will have left, you'd probably pick out the Lord of the Rings map of New Zealand. Like, if we're just doing it from this angle as well, if we're not even describing the whole room, Lord of the Rings map of New Zealand, the fact that there is a dog gate on the stairs, and maybe that the walls are magnolia, or that there's a doorway to the kitchen right behind me, and another dog gate. Or you might decide to pick the chair, or the fact that there's stuff strewn across the radiator that I haven't picked up yet, even though it's dry. Because the second part of the 3 sentences is that, well actually the second part of my big description advice is that each of the things that you pick out, they're not just there to be there like, oh, the walls are green, because they're green. Let's move on. Now you can picture it. Like, part of it is picking things that are relevant to the character, that it build upon and expand upon the character as a person. Like, if I may use Mary Ellen breaking the curse, because it's what I have. And And also it's the only book I have to hand at the minute because again I'm packing and everything is packed away. So if we're looking in, oh, I've dented it. This is my aunt. Gregorio introduced from his position on the far right of the sofa. He gestured at the woman sat beside him. Her ears marked her as an elf, the tips in sharp points that aimed towards the crown of her head. Sentence 1. She's an elf. Judging by her midnight blue day armour, she was either a mercenary or a woman with a penchant for getting into trouble of the violent variety. Sentence number 2. She wears blue day armour, but not just that, she's also got a penchant for getting into trouble of the violent variety. And or is a mercenary. She is a mercenary. And, like, later, when you find out that she is the person who's cursed, as in, you know, breaking the curse, this curse, she is the one who is cursed. So, like, this is a very apt assessment by Mary. I leaned towards mercenary as I noticed a dual sword strapped to her back. That is technically another sentence, so I am breaking my own rule here. I looked between her and Gregorio, searching for the family resemblance. They were both gold elves and had similar brown hair with gold highlights, medium brown skin, and glinting gold eyes. The sharpness of their noses matched. It was difficult to compare Gregorio's wavy hair with hers, since hers was pulled tightly back. Okay, it's more than 3 sentences. I know. It's the longest piece of description you get, but it's because Raquel is such an important character. That's the character's name. She's such an important character, despite the fact that she doesn't really do much, because again, she is literally in the title. Then we have another example in the same scene. Calic, he said, his voice deep and clear. You can count that as a description if you so wish. I probably wouldn't, but you know. Tight black curls lay across his forehead. Sentence number 1. He was totally human, musculature defined even through his guardian uniform. The white of his shirt contrasted with his dark skin in the same way Commander Whitclay's did, though Calic's had a green colonel stripe under the guardian crest, rather than Whitclay's Commander red. So you get here 2 for 1, because you also get a description of Commander Whitclay, which is great, because I hadn't described him before that point, and that's definitely not a great plan. But yeah, that's the whole description of Calic in that moment, is literally, his voice is deep and clear, he's got tight black curls that lie across his forehead, he's totally human, musculature defined even through his guardian uniform, and the white of his guardian uniform shirt contrasts with his dark skin. Ta-da, you know what Calic looks like. The highlights for this is the clearness of his voice is so relevant to the character because he's very verbose, like he talks a lot. And the more he likes a person, the more he rambles, which becomes like a whole thing later on when he starts trying to like befriend Mary, is that he starts rambling and she's kind of there like, what? And there's also all of these glorious moments where Mary, who is a spell singer, it's not a spoiler, she's a spell singer, she's training in spell singing, and so obviously to her sounds are really important, and like the way people talk is really important, because when you are a trained singer, which I am, that kind of thing impacts and is relevant and becomes something that you listen to and listen for. And so his voice being clear is one of those moments of like, a clear voice is like a real thing that actually happened, like people actually have. And also, it means that his voice can cut across a room. That's one of the things a clear voice can do. It can cut across a lot of noise. It becomes very distinguishable. It becomes something easily recognizable, which is useful later in the story. Which is another reason I like doing it. Doing description once I've finished the story and I know which character is the most important. Then you have the fact that Calic is a human, which isn't really relevant, it's just like important that you know in this fantasy universe where there's humans, dragonborn, elves and goblins, who is what. And massive musculature defined even through his guardian uniform. He's strong, he's fit, he's a guardian colonel. Of course he's strong and fit, but like you could literally see it even under his uniform. Even someone like me who is dyslexic and tends to skip description will probably have read that if I hadn't, you know, written this book in the first place. So yeah, it's useful to connect your description with something that is going to become relevant about the character later on, or if you don't want to do that, that's fine too. 3 sentences is the optimum thing to aim for. You can do a little bit more, you can do a little bit less, but aim for the 3 sentences because it gives you a solid foundation. It gives you a sort of cut-off point as well, so you don't end up in the laundry list. You pick maybe 3 features or maybe a few more if they're interlinked features, like the fact that where they're like, oh, he's human, he's muscular, and he's got dark skin because he's in a Guardian uniform and it contrasts with his skin, and that's a whole sentence. All of that is packed into one sentence. But it all relates to one another. Musculature defined through his Guardian uniform shirt, which contrasts with his dark skin. It's all related to that Guardian uniform shirt. I also highly recommend going through and describing, as I already said, every time we meet a new character, every time we end up in a new place, the second time we meet that character or go to that place, add in a little extra description just to remind the reader, but it only probably needs to happen the first 2 or 3 times. And then anytime there's an important plot device that you can visually see. And finally, actually also anytime time changes and you like have dawn or dark lights, or the lights come on or the lights go off or whatever it is, like denoting time through description is really great. And then finally, and probably the most important one that people tend to forget, any time that a character or location's appearance changes. So, for example, in Mary Arlan Breaking the Curse, we have a ball, a formal event that Mary goes to. People obviously dress nice for a formal event, so they have to be redescribed. Because, hey, guess what? They don't look like they did in the last chapter, because they're dressed up for a formal event. They've got formal event hair, they've got formal event clothes. Like, do you think I would go to a formal event like this? I would not. I mean, maybe this hair, actually. I think my hair looks really nice. But but yeah, I wouldn't go in this shirt that says "Here to help" on the back. What I got from when I was doing open days at uni. I'm not going to go to a formal event in that. I'm going to go to a formal event in formal clothes, which obviously is going to make me look different. I'm going to dress up nicer. I'm going to do things to my hair. I'm not just going to let it poof and explode all over my face. Like, bye Dana. It's a whole thing. And everybody does that. People who go to formal events, like they do in Mary Arlan Breaking the Curse, they go to formal events with a different appearance than what they would normally have. And I'm not going to read you the whole description because I feel like that would just start getting boring. But yeah, 3 sentences, and try to link your description to relevant things about the character later. If you can, and if you can't, that's totally fine. And here's the thing, if you do go through and do it all in one go at the end of your rewrites, the beauty of that is you're not going to have the issue of like, oh shoot, what were this character's eye colour? Because you're going to know because you've literally just described it. Anyway, I hope you found this entertaining, if not helpful. If you want to find me or my book all over the internet, or even just a link to my Ko-fi account if you feel like supporting the channel, all of the links you might need are in the description box below, right next to the like and subscribe buttons if you feel like sticking around. I will see you in 2 weeks' time, and hopefully I will be filming in my brand new flat. Bye!